It's Friday, and it's the day after the SBR September 2022 exam. And I want to share with you and summarize with you my first reaction to the exam sitting as based upon my student experiences. And there's three things I want to do. First of all, I want to tell you it was a time-pressured exam. And it was a time-pressured exam that actually my students were able broadly to cope with. But SBR is always time-pressured. Secondly, I want to tell you about the curious incident of the dog in the night. But I'll come back to that later. And thirdly, I want to take you through question by question what came up. So question one is groups. It always is. Now, there's more than one group accounts question. There's more than one exam knocking around. So one of the questions had a calculation of goodwill, the sort of thing that you would expect. But of course, there were twists. Step acquisition, an issue around fair value adjustments. And for the record, what the acquirer is going to do with the asset is irrelevant. You're determining the fair value at the date of acquisition, the market value at the date of acquisition. And if the acquirer intends to throw the asset away, you ignore that. One of the questions had PEA being tested, power, exposure, ability to use the power. Yes. Is a 45% holding a subsidiary? It can be. The question would have given out various facts and scenarios to explain and expected you to discuss them in the context of the definition of a sub being control and not a number. And I suspect from the information that I've picked up, it probably was a sub with a 55% NCI as a result. I was pleased to hear that joint operations got tested or appear to have got tested. And that was nice because that was a very recent article of mine that I wrote. Question two, ethics. Of course it's on ethics. Well, there's normally other issues in there as well. And some people said there was a revenue problem where there was an issue about deciding on performance obligations. Echoes of my mock there, echoes of FR there, really. Shows that breadth is really important. It shows that accounting, the basics are really important because revenue comes up at FR, really. But I still cover it again because it comes up again at SBR. Some question twos had expected credit losses on financial assets. Now, that's not FR at all. Yeah, that's getting pretty technical. So some described the ethical issue as fairly standard in the context of self-interest and intimidation. Others highlighted an insider trading aspect, which seemed to have a resonance with a question I wrote and was a marked assignment on my revision course called Genge, where there was a suspicion of insider trading and action had to be given. And it had to be linked to the 5 pillars. There's no point in discussing the 5 pillars in abstract. You've got to link it to a lack of integrity, yeah, in that example. Now, section B, what do you expect in section B? Standards, 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 application, application, application. And this section B didn't disappoint. Is it a lease? Is it not a lease? Should you provide? Should you not provide? Intangible assets, foreign currency, it was all there. Yeah? It was all there in one of the exams. Not everything was in the one exam. But it was set always in a practical context. You hadn't paid sales tax. Yeah, there was a description of a scenario and you had to make a judgment. Rote learning definitions is never going to be enough to pass this exam. You're always going to have to take your knowledge and apply it in a practical situation and use your professional judgment. Section B, for many students, also had what appeared to be quite a big question on a current issue: climate change, sustainability reporting. But it was more than that. You know, not only do you have to justify why it's relevant for businesses to get involved in sustainability reporting, yeah, see my mock exam, whatever. But this also was in the real exam here, in this actual exam here, because it's such a current issue. Materiality came up. You know, you had a coal company overseas, whatever. It was a practical situation. And yes, it's nice to hear that several students were listening to my podcast on sustainability reporting as they walked into the exam. But that you are never going to get an identikit answer that you can take into the exam, memorize, and suddenly there's the question and you produce it. You've always got to read the question and you've always got to answer the question using your knowledge to make sure that you pick up those marks. The curious incident of the dog in the night is a phrase that is a Sherlock Holmes story. And the curious incident was the dog didn't bark. That was the curious incident of the dog in the night, that the dog didn't bark. It was also a fantastic play on at the National Theatre a few years ago. But in this context, the curious incident was my students were not complaining that this exam was too technical, that this exam was impossible, that this exam was too hard. Sometimes they do, but this exam seemed to be fair. Fair on the time management, if you've been practicing questions at time. And although it had a breadth of knowledge, it didn't go over the top. It didn't seem to test things that students found impossible. They had covered the ground. So I'm really pleased for the ACCA. I'm really pleased for my students. And I hope you agree with that feedback. If you've experienced the exam yourself and you've got a different view, please reach out, let me know. I'll be curious and interested in listening to your experiences. Now, some of my students did their exam in an exam center, and some of my students did their exam remotely, in other words, at home. To date, I have received no negative feedback from students doing exams in their exam centers. Up and down the UK, across Ireland, and throughout the world, my sample is exam centers work fine. The remotely invigilated students, though, unfortunately, I have had a few isolated and very sad and frustrated problems and students and issues cropping up. Now, a couple of those have been resolved, hopefully, by students being able to sit the exam next week. Because if you do a remotely invigilated exam and you do all the proper documented tests and something goes wrong in the exam, you get an opportunity of doing it a week later, providing you're not doing the UK variant. A couple of others, though, have still got unresolved issues and looks like they will have to be doing the exam in December. And they're resolved to do it in an exam centre again and not take the risk of something going wrong, which they are deemed to be responsible for, on a remotely invigilated exam. So look, that's it. It's done. You cannot change the past. I wish you well. The exam marking process will get underway and is a rigorous experience, a rigorous process by the ACCA to make sure that it's fair and balanced. They've got a lot of checks and balances built into that process. Good luck to everybody waiting on results. But if you want to be properly prepared for an SBR exam, you need to do a proper course. I can help you with that. You need to do mock exams, get feedback, improve, go on a journey, and I can certainly help you do that as well. So please, you know how to find me, reach out, and I will help you with your SBR. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for listening.